call this meeting to order here. I'm pulling up my agenda right now. So yeah, first off are the minutes from December. Everybody get a chance to look at those?
Yep. I move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Moving on to the reading support, so I'll turn that over to Amy.
Well, thanks for having us tonight to talk about reading support. So I brought several members here to help engage us in this conversation tonight. Diane and I are here, of course. Sarah Yoder, she's our literacy support specialist, and she helps support K-6 literacy, entry level, of course. Beth Madden is instructional design strategist at Alexander Elementary. Heather Stevens, lead support teacher at the ESC. She primarily works with our elementary special education teachers and supports them mostly on the academic side, but also on the behavioral side. And then Chris Gibson is the principal at Alexander. So what I thought we'd do is kind of give a overview of things that are happening at the district level and that we hope is happening in the way of implementation in our buildings. And then towards the tail end of the presentation, you're going to get more of a feel from how this all plays out then at one of our buildings, Alexander Elementary. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to start walking us through this. If it can be conversational if you want to ask questions as we go, or we're happy to take questions after.
So we'll just start, like Amy said, start big picture to give you a view of the elementary literacy around the Iowa City schools, including the support that we offer students in core instruction as well as in reading supports. So we our work is guided by the MTSS system, which is the multi-tiered system of support. It is our decision-making framework across all of our elementary schools. And we use this framework to help us meet the needs of all students, starting in general education and then layering on as needed. So the graphic is important to us because as you see that bottom layer there is core instruction, and it goes in the area of academics and social emotional behavior, mental health, but that core instruction is for all students. And then the tiers are layered on as needed using assessment data that we collect. Our PLC structures in the elementaries really are our vehicle for guiding the work to identify what we want students to learn in elementary literacy. How are they responding to instruction, and then what do we need to do as teachers to help support that learning? So we operate with PLC questions, starting with what is it that we want students to learn? And of course that's guided by our content, our core literacy standards, and you see those in the left column. And then we also support teachers in understanding that we also have to think about the how. We know what we want to teach, but how students are responding to instruction and what support students need to put in place. So we also have development in that area. Our PLC conversations help teachers problem solve, brainstorm, and plan instruction using those areas that are listed there.
Before you move on, just a couple of things related back to PD. So, the content, what's taught, is really driven by the Iowa Core Literacy Standards, and Sarah, you want to click on that link? This is just a nice quick place that you can refer to on the DE website by grade and then by strand. It would tell you what the expectations are for language arts, writing, reading, through all of those. We've gone in and done work to prioritize those standards so that our teachers really know what to focus on, although they're still responsible for all the standards. And just to give you a quick snapshot, that means K-6, our teachers could be responsible in literacy to teach anywhere from 60 to 90 some standards. So there's a litany of standards and sub-standards for them to teach. And then Sarah talked about kind of a two-pronged look at what do we want all students to know. First, it's that content piece that we're into looking at right now, but kind of a subset question is how is that taught? That's where the rubber meets the road. That's the magic. That's the teacher instruction piece. And not only do our teachers receive professional development around any sort of materials that we're providing for them in the way of universal materials or reading supports materials, but then also in what could different groupings look like. Sarah, specifically, we're in the middle of a huge task, which is rolling out what a small group instruction needs to look like. It's a 3-hour module that we're providing to every single building. We will get through all elementaries this year, and next year we'll have just 5 of the 21 buildings left. So also what that can look like, whole group versus small group. That's what we're providing PD at specifically this year.
So knowing what we need to teach in the elementary literacy field. And then the second question is, how do we know if our students have learned it? How are students responding to instruction? So we have this list that continues to grow of assessments, and different types of assessments give us different types of information. So we have our screening information to look at the healthy system, and we have diagnostic information to really kind of pinpoint student needs. We have formative assessment that gives us information aligned with the standards for our grade level, as well as how to see how students are responding. We have progress monitoring, where we do frequent checks for students who need to be closely monitored. And then we have that summative Iowa statewide assessment of student progress to look at.
So can I just share something? So as far as the screening data, that's the data that oftentimes the board is asking to see. How are the students doing 3 times a year with reading or with math? So that's really up into that screening piece. All students receive that, again, 3 times a year, K-6. That then would dictate to us whether they need progress monitored. If they're falling out and not proficient, we would be then progress monitoring them once a week. But before we get there, we also may apply these diagnostic screeners to get further information on the child.
Our fast bridge system houses all of our screening assessments and our progress monitoring assessments, and it is organized by class for each teacher. So it's a way to view reports on our screening data, as well as weekly progress monitoring for students that need to have that. So it's an important system that we use in all of our elementaries. So we have what we need to teach. We assess students to monitor that learning, but then if we have students who are not responding to that instruction, we have that additional layer that we can add on to our multi-tier support systems of intervention. So whether that be a tier 2 or tier 3 intervention. And the screenshot just indicates what we have organized for elementary teachers to identify and have conversations about what types of interventions would fit the needs that are being identified by the assessments. So this this document has a bank of actually 29 reading interventions that we have available for our teachers for tier 2 or tier 3. And this document houses that ability for PLC teams to say, I've identified this need through the diagnostic screening. This intervention fits that learner characteristic. We also have monitoring tools for teachers to make sure that there is a fidelity to that intervention that has been identified to meet that need for the reader.
Can you just maybe go back and talk about that a little bit? So you'll notice on this document that, like Sarah shared, we have 29 different interventions that our teams could have access to. Not all buildings have access necessarily to all 29. Our Title I buildings, given the fact that they have access to some extra dollars, can sometimes purchase additional interventions that our other buildings wouldn't be able to. We work hard, though, to make things available to all buildings if they are out seeking or feeling like they don't have an answer for an area that they have identified. So the first column really just shows the name of some interventions, and then if you work your way across, it tells you what grade levels those interventions are designated for, what specific skills it targets, what materials the teacher should be looking for. And then here's another key piece, is this session frequency and duration. And that'll come into play as we get over to the fidelity checklist at the end. Again, Sarah already referred to the learner characteristics, what kind of student might need to be receiving this sort of intervention. And the last piece is the piece that we've been really working on probably in the last year to year and a half, is building or collecting fidelity checklist. Because what we don't want to do is, as we're progress monitoring a student in and week out, and we're not seeing progress on their graphs or them making progress as quickly as we'd like them to, the first question we need to ask ourselves, without leaving that intervention is, first of all, are we implementing it with fidelity? And we can go through and use these checklists then, and the teacher can do it themselves. They can ask the instructional coach to come in. They can ask a colleague. It's certainly not meant as a evaluation with their teaching ability or anything like that. It's just more as a double check that, okay, yep, we feel like we've done this with fidelity and we're still not seeing the needed progress. And at that point, 4 or 5 data points in, they might be changing up the intervention.
Let's gonna talk a little bit about how this works at the building level then.
So really, I'll just be reinforcing the process that Sarah was just sharing. Our universal screenings happen 3 times a year, September-ish, January, and April, May. And at the end of the universal screening period, we get all of the data back for every single one of our students, and then it becomes time to interpret. So we're studying which students are making expected progress. Many times in our school, we're also studying which students haven't met the benchmark but are actually making accelerated progress towards that benchmark. And we study the data of the students who did not meet the benchmark. That process involves also looking at diagnostic assessments, the results of which will inform which intervention we select for our students. And we've got a couple of really rock-solid diagnostic screeners in place that we can use that really do inform the process at a very specific level and allow us to make the most informed decision about the interventions that we're going to put in place. So once all of that data has been studied, and we do that in PLCs, we often will try to pull our ELL teachers into that conversation, or special education teachers into that conversation, as well as all of our grade level teachers, so that everyone's a part of the discussion. And also in those meetings, we'll discuss at which table are we taking care of all of the pieces of learning, because we have a lot to take care of in core as well as within the intervention. So we determine the interventions that students will receive if they did not meet the benchmark and implement. That process really runs at a very fine-tuned level at Alexander because we have many people who have been doing this now for several years. But if a classroom teacher is going to be implementing an intervention that he or she has not implemented before, I am typically the person who will go out and model that intervention for several days in a row so that the teacher can see a series of lessons and how one piece connects to the next. And then the teacher, of course, would be implementing the intervention after that. Another way that we'll get that information to teachers, if I know that there's a teacher who's implementing an intervention, I may go provide classroom relief and allow the teacher who's learning it to go observe the colleague. But we do make sure that before an intervention is implemented, some degree of professional learning has happened for teachers so that they don't feel like they're trying to teach something they're not familiar with. Progress monitoring occurs, as Amy mentioned, every single week. We're studying the graphs very carefully to see if progress is being made with our students. And if it's not, sometimes the change that we make is not necessarily within the intervention. Sometimes we'll modify something within a core small group. Sometimes we'll add a piece to the ELL table or add a piece to the special education table. So it's really all about having that bird's eye view of what is happening for each student in all environments and at every table in the school. But we do that progress monitoring piece and monitor that information carefully. So that is just a general overview of what it looks like at the elementary level.
One thing we haven't talked about is class-wide interventions and when that comes into play. So typically, we're intervening on the behalf at the student level if they're falling out on assessments, given the universal screener. But we also take a look across the grade level or the particular classroom we're talking about.
Okay, so class-wide intervention is recommended if your grade level is 60% or less proficient. So I'll use kindergarten as an example. One of the most frequently used class-wide interventions in kindergarten in our district is published by the 95% group, and it addresses the area of phonological awareness, which is just an awareness of different units within words, particularly sounds. And so at Alexander, we deliver that intervention in a whole group format to the entire class, because additional work in phonological and phonemic awareness will never hurt anyone, and it's just one way for us to be sure in another setting that we are addressing those critical foundational skills that are required to learn how to read.
Heather or Chris, would you guys add anything?
I think the nicest part about this process the last few years is that special ed and gen ed have been working together and recognizing that the more inclusive we can be with children, the more we can talk about instruction together, the more we can work on meeting the standards instead of solely relying on materials, the better for all kids. So it's been really exciting as these documents came up to be part of the special ed department and realize I sat in on that committee and helped create that. I sat in on it, so I think that's been the nicest change over the past few years, is to know that we're working harder together. Whereas in the past, that strategies document you saw, we had a special ed list of recommended materials that was separate. And now, again, it's been a work in progress, together as a team. So while special ed may need additional strategies, beyond that, it's nice to start there at that universal level of core that everyone receives.
And I would just second what Heather was saying about just the power in the whole group. As she was saying, special ed was separate in the past, but now that we are all working together, it's a stronger group of people, and we're all have the same training, the same learning, the same materials, and we can really have a laser focused view on each child. And let's see, I was going to make another point, but I lost it.
How do you identify the kids who are advanced, and then what do you do for those kids, and how does that work?
So that's a great question, very pertinent right now to our learning with this small group module, because we're really honing in on what is happening within that hour of core small group, and paying really close attention to whether or not we're meeting the needs of all of the learners in the class, not just the students who are not performing at benchmark. So as an example, I'll just speak from a conversation I just recently had with a 6th grade teacher, and she had studied her data before she sat down with me, and she had grouped her kids into 4 or 5 different groups according to what she believed were their areas of focus. And of course, she had some students who had not met the benchmark, who had foundational skill areas of focus, but she had several very capable, competent readers in her class. And she was really wanting to be sure that she was meeting their needs and challenging them as well. And for students who are above the benchmark, we're probably going to go after vocabulary development, comprehension of that rigorous text. And so working with her for all of those groups in her class, we set up a rotation schedule so that every student would meet the teacher 3 to 5 times a week. And for students who were above the benchmark, we were discussing various ways that we could use texts that we have available to us, and instructional strategies we could use to expose them to that grade level or above text, and support the development of those learners as well. So this whole small group module has been really powerful in giving us a venue and a structure to address the needs of all of our students.
I imagine it's easier in 3rd grade, but when you get to 6th grade, getting that higher grade level material, is that a challenge? Or?
I wouldn't say it's a challenge to get the material. No matter what grade level a teacher is teaching it at Alexander, you're going to have a pretty wide range of abilities. It does get broader as you advance in grade, so the 6th grade teacher has to be just as capable and competent about teaching a brand new ELL student as he or she feels about teaching a student reading 2 or 3 grade levels above. And that's the goal, is that no matter who walks through the door, you will feel capable and competent to meet their needs.
And I think that's the power of the PLC, and when we focus on data at the PLC meeting, we are looking at the growth of every single child. So we have the data from the entire grade level, and we're looking at the growth from fall to winter, winter to spring, and we're looking at every single child. And if they're not making expected growth, then we focus in on them and we look at instruction and make changes where necessary. And so I think it's back to the systems that we have put in place in our district. Like Beth said, when a new student walks into the classroom, we know exactly what to do to assess, diagnose, and give them the instruction that they need. And we're on top of it with the progress monitoring, if necessary.
I've got a couple of questions. One on your screening and identifying a student that has challenges. Are there? I mean, is there sometimes with just the first screening, you know right away we've got an issue, and we put them in that program and start getting them that individual, and do we give individual reading assistance, or is it small group, or sometimes is it one-on-one? If you could elaborate on that.
Sure. So our K-3 legislation would tell us that if a student's falling out the first time on the universal screener, that at a minimum we need to be providing progress monitoring each week. Best practice would say that if we know they're falling out on that screener and have other evidence, the teacher every day knows that they're low grade level, that we'd be intervening and attaching one of these 29 interventions to them. On top of that, yeah, we do have some of our interventions require one-to-one support. Reading recovery is an intervention we're using in some of our buildings. That would be one-to-one instruction. But by and large, I would say the majority of the instruction that we're delivering is in small group for intervention.
And just how small is considered a small group?
I would say 3 to 5 is
Okay.
probably pretty typical, but it can be a little bit larger than that. I'd have to defer to Chris and Beth to tell me about what their sizes look like right now. But
We try to keep students who are sort of by a title teacher. Typically, some of our students who are lower in grade level, we try to keep those groups 4 or below. We do have occasional group of 5 or 6 that sneaks in. It just depends on how many students in the grade need support and how many providers we have available during the intervention block to provide the support. But yes, and classroom groups are a little larger than that sometimes.
Right, and use the example like kindergarten. Do we have higher grades that you do like a classroom intervention when you have 60% or less proficiency? Okay, and so that's the whole class, even the ones that are in the 40% that are proficient. There's, like you say, nothing hurts someone reaffirming those. Okay. On those same lines, I've heard from staff that we have students that come in. They might be a junior or senior ELL student that they might be at a very low level compared, and they're aging out in a couple. In a couple of years they're graduating. What, if anything, are we, what can we do in a scenario like that? What?
So we provide sheltered classes. I'm going to lean on Diane and Matt to talk more about the secondary to support our ELL learners that are coming in. It is definitely a challenge when they're coming to us with the language that in their age.
Right. So at the secondary level, I wish we had the kind of system that exists at the elementary level. We just don't in the gen ed. Lisa might be able to speak more to special ed. But when you think about all the supports that the elementary has, the state has an early literacy intervention program. So they put funding, they give us a free assessment for our students. They also give us $128,000 every year to spend toward intervention materials. We, like probably 98% of the districts across the state, focus our title funds completely at the elementary. So the elementary has interventionists. We use dropout prevention funds to provide interventionists at the elementary. Elementary has PLC time to get together and meet. They have longer professional development time on Thursday. They have a full-time literacy support person. We just don't have any of that at the secondary. So our plan falls short, I would say, at the secondary level for what we're able to provide students who come in who are struggling. So we certainly have ELL services for those students. So those students that receive them through ELL often pull out time where they're just working on their English skills. But then they also have what Amy referred to as sheltered classes. So they might take biology or a social studies class within a sheltered environment, which means that those teachers have had PSYOP training, specific training to help develop the language skills of the kids in the class. And they're also getting the content as well. So those are some of the supports that we're able to give. We do have some dropout funding support that we dedicate at the secondary level to provide like a reading strategies course for kids that might take in addition to the regular reading course. So that's a support that we're able to offer. And then, I don't know, Lisa, if you want to talk a little bit about special ed supports.
Is the question what kind of supports do we offer?
Yeah.
First? I mean, along the lines of what you were saying about just, instructional practices that align with determining some of the things that were up on the chart here just a minute ago, determining some common forming assessments and classroom assessments, then figuring out for students what needs retaught, remediated, that sort of thing, would be the kind of work that drives IEP goals and then subsequent services. So I'm not sure if I can be more specific because special ed support is individualized for the student, but that's basically we figure out what they can't do and then try to robust up their instruction in that area.
Diane, is reading strategies for gen ed kids too?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, sorry. Yep, reading strategies is for gen ed kids. And we're also looking at, some additional assessments at the secondary level. We're piloting the iReady assessment, which is a reading assessment, to try to identify students that might need those extra supports. It's been a challenge too, the schedule at the secondary level. There are class periods and we do have an intervention period, but when you're talking about a reading teacher who might have 150, 180 kids, it's hard for them to provide an intervention in a 20-minute period to, if you say 3 or 4 would be nice, they might have 30 or 50 kids that could use that intervention. So it's been a struggle at the secondary, definitely.
At least I don't mean to indicate special ed kids aren't gen ed kids,
Sure.
but I know special ed supports are there, right? And that's a lot. But sometimes I worry about those kids falling through the cracks who don't qualify for special ed, but they're certainly not, they're missing a lot of content because their reading just isn't there.
Sure.
And so would you say that's pretty typical for a reading strategies teacher to have 150 to 180 kids?
I'm just saying, I'm sorry, just even the general ed reading teacher, like who teaches literacy 7th grade, let's say.
Okay.
Or the general ed language arts teacher that's
Oh,
going to have
well, yeah.
150 to 180 kids. And, if some of those 20% of them need supports, that's a lot of kids.
Yeah.
For her to provide an intervention for during that intervention block.
Does that happen?
We do have that intervention block every day.
Okay.
So there's the little hog time or, biking time or whatever you
What
might
about
want to
at
call
the high
that.
school?
Yep,
Yeah, okay.
yep, it's provided then as well. Chances are most of the time though, because the student could get might be having to talk to the math teacher and the science teacher and the
Right.
social studies teacher as well. There isn't like a daily intervention program that is delivered. It tends to be more of a let's try to catch you up, let's
Catch
try
up on
to
your homework.
catch up on your homework,
Right.
let's retake
Retake
this
the
test,
test.
let's work a little bit more in depth on this. And again, with a 20-minute period and multiple kids that need support, it's been a struggle to be able to provide that.
I think our place to possibly lean in and look at doing some things differently there would be in our success centers.
Okay.
Because like Diane articulated, a couple of challenges just with, once we get to high school, we know success is really based on credit accumulation and getting towards graduation, but we know that there's skill gaps in there too. Just because you acquire credits or get a grade for a class doesn't mean you've refined all your skills in reading or math. And so, trying to, I think, have a ongoing critical conversation about what happens in Success Center, and are we just addressing the will issue for kids about getting homework done and getting it turned in and accumulating credits and grades, or are we really intervening on the behalf of any skills? Because like she said in that intervention block, I mean, that's pretty hard to do too, and to have data surrounding it about where they exactly need that intervention. And so I think those are some of the conversations we'll start to have, but just traditional ways we've done school and schedule and frameworks, I mean, at the secondary have been barriers to that, and I think we just have to start looking at how we start to alter that a little bit and change our mindset about what's really important for the kids.
Yeah, I would say, our Success Center teachers really equipped to do a reading intervention? I don't
No, but I
know.
think that's the opportunity we have. I mean, we have a couple principals looking at potentially doing something different with when those success center positions turn over about could we do a math interventionist or a reading interventionist in that, and then what would they do, right? And how could we organize that, or how could that work? In the era of NCLB, what you saw a lot of secondary schools do was pile on another period of the class where they were deficient. Well, if you're not good at math and lack some skills at math and now having 2 periods of math, that's probably not the best approach to it, but how do we still refine your math skills? And so some fluidity in that is important, that it can't just be the same students for the whole trimester, that different kids have different skill gaps, and how do you operate within that? So I think all our Success Center teachers have certifications all over the board, but as we have some opportunities to look at doing something differently, that's what we're going to try to get off the ground.
I mean, you guys say progress monitoring, that's all kids. That's not just special ed.
It's any student.
Or the kids who need it, but they don't need to qualify. So that model might be something, I mean, I get the secondary schedule, and the logistics are difficult, but,
And that's like what Diane said, with some of those tools we're starting to use, then we have data surrounding it and might have an idea on where to intervene on behalf of kids, right? Where to start with them, and then aligning the staff with the time to be able to do that, and where are the time of the student schedules to do that. So I think it's a challenge we know, obviously, we have to take on and have to start to address.
We're also looking at technology to see if that can help provide an intervention. So we're piloting Lexia, which we've been using at the elementary for a few years, and we just expanded that to the junior highs this year. So that's a program that the students during Success Center could get on and work on. But they still need to have that language arts teacher monitoring their progress and then stepping in to intervene when they see them getting stuck. And that's just been kind of a logistics challenge for us to make sure that's happening.
and I'm assuming Lexia for junior high looks like Lexia for junior high and not?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And
It's called Lexia Power Up, not
Yeah.
even Core 5, so it looks a little bit more grown up.
What's the age? Do they do high school stuff too, or is it just kind of?
Lexia, I think stuff. Well, no, actually their Power Up does go to the high school.
Okay.
Excuse me, you had something?
So over the years, I've gotten questions different times from parents of dyslexic students about how we differentiate our instruction for them. How do they fit into this model?
So same thing would apply. We would use the universal screener. They would fall out, just like any of our other students. And then we'd go through and use the diagnostic screener to further identify their needs. So because they'd have the diagnosis, doesn't necessarily mean we treat them any differently. We would still employ the same types of screeners and be using interventions like the rest of the kiddos would have. 95% group is oftentimes the set of materials that we end up engaging students with dyslexia in.
Does the University of Iowa, and I'm glad you brought up the dyslexia one, I was going to bring it up, and I hate bringing it up all the time just myself. But does University of Iowa have a reading clinic like they used to, and we take advantage of that? I was a student of it in the 70s at Seashore Hall, and in a small rural district, parents carpooled to take us over there, and we had one-on-one instruction with grad students, and I learned how to read with Janet Kendall, who helped me, and I had dyslexia, which still have it, it didn't go away, but is that something that's available, and do we utilize that?
As of, I'll maybe have to defer to Diane here, but as of a couple of summers ago, we were still working with them with their reading clinic. In fact, they were serving some students at Coralville Central Elementary in the summertime. Are you aware?
We did, I think we did last year, but I can't say for sure. Yeah.
Okay,
Joan
well,
Vandenberg runs that program through our.
Okay, well, for a testimonial from myself, it was an excellent program, and they were able, I think, to provide things that at least our district couldn't do that way. And talking about summer programming, of course, we don't have money to do what we want or maybe need, and that what opportunities do we have that way, or what do we offer for summer curriculum?
So last year, we utilized some of that early intervention funding that the state gave us, and we offered summer school at all of our sites, or almost all of our sites. There were a few, I think, in transition that didn't offer it. We were able to offer 20 hours of additional programming for our students. we've looked at the data, we've measured, where they were in the spring and then where they came back in the fall, and found that 20 hours didn't make a difference. At some of our sites through the 21st Century Schools, they were able to offer 5 weeks or 4 weeks. I can't remember if it's been 6 and they only did 5 last week, if it's been 5 and only 4. They were 1 week short last week just because of how the timing scheduled. And so a much more intensive summer school program, looked at data, didn't make a difference. The state, a couple of years ago, when we were kind of working on that legislation that said if you weren't proficient by 3rd grade, you had to be retained or attend a summer school program, they offered a summer school program that I think was 70 hours. Looked at the data, didn't make a difference. So I know we always feel like the summer program is a great opportunity for kids to catch up, but for some reason it hasn't been making a difference.
So does that let parents off the hook for reading to their kids during the summer?
Gosh, no. Gosh, no.
Well, so data doesn't support the summer programs help?
Not the way the summer programs have been delivered, at least.
Really?
Yeah.
That's, okay.
Yeah.
Can I add on to just like
Please,
the question?
please.
This is kind of my
Oh,
passion.
good. Excellent.
Oh,
This is true.
Yeah.
This is who I call when I really need an answer.
This is who I go.
No, but I think it's a fabulous question. I'm like chomping at the bit. I am honestly shocked at how far the district has come in the past 8 to 10 years in terms of what we do for kids with dyslexia. I'm not sure we even had screeners in place for all kids to kind of recognize some of those early indicators. And what I see now in terms of screening and diagnosis and working with language deficits, that's the big thing with dyslexia, with phonological awareness, phonemic awareness at a young age. I'm so excited to look at our data in a few years now that we're addressing this in core instruction and see where we're at. Our special ed teachers have access to all the materials that gen ed teachers have, but we decided last year to partner with the Iowa Center for Reading Research because it's right in Iowa City, and Deborah Reed is the director. We asked her to come and talk to all of our special ed teachers about some of the basics, just to have a common reading vocabulary and just let them know this is like a 5 to 10 year project that we really want to firm up our specialized reading instruction. So Deborah came, did some PD about theory, worked with us on some of these frameworks that you just saw for all kiddos in terms of the components of reading, definitions of reading. But then we have also done some modules with Sarah about what makes instruction explicit and systematic, looking at language, looking at phonics. We've done some training we're getting everyone the same materials-based training, like we keep mentioning 95% group of the research is great, and they have phonological awareness and phonics, 2 areas that they struggle in. We're working on that training, and then our next step hopefully is place it kind of a long-term vision that will hopefully continue, but our next step is to work on that multisensory toolkit for teachers so that they have access to everything everyone else does, but then we can use some of the multisensory techniques that we know work and add them on no matter what you're using. I just came from one of the elementaries where a parent was concerned about their child with dyslexia, and we said, what are you doing? That's great, and here are some multisensory, like just peg word strategies that are, kind of along that Wilson-Orton line, but you can add them to any scope and sequence of skills and materials. So I think it's definitely something we're aware of, working on, doing a great job now. I also track some of the data for kids that have dyslexia and what we're doing, and the couple I'm tracking are making more than expected growth, but we want to get better. So.
Well, and I think you hit on it that just I know from my own personal experience that there were some strategies that they were trying weren't working at all.
Yeah.
And then it was like a switch got turned when I was with Janet Kendall, and it just exploded.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's a frustration for everyone involved when it's not going the way you want it to. So that's great to hear.
Absolutely.
And are you referring to the students that have an IEP?
Yes.
Because oftentimes the parents I've heard from are those students that don't have an IEP that have dyslexia.
And I hope that as we've been communicating so well as teams, I hope that as we discover, I call it like a toolkit, but really it's simple, like O-Y, boy, oi. And you just teach kids O-Y, boy, oi, and they're tracing in the sand, and they have the peg word, and they're doing writing and reading with it. I hope that as we develop these toolkits, we are sharing them with anyone who needs it, because I think the lines are blending right now between gen ed and special ed. So as you can tell, I'm super excited about it, but I feel like it's an area that we're all looking at.
So when my daughter was in elementary school forever ago, there was programs that her elementary school offered for students who struggled in reading, for us to learn some of those strategies and work with those students at home. Do we do any of that where it's like clinics after school that families are invited in? I just remember that helped her a lot because she was getting the same type of instruction at home for her to make it up to grade level and actually go beyond. Because without, if she's struggling at school and being taught one way and then at home and I'm just reading to her, we can probably lose that disconnect. So is there anything like that now?
So a couple
It was a long time ago.
A couple things come to mind is our Title I reading nights that our buildings would host, our Title I buildings for sure. The other thing is, as the kiddos fall out, and we're expected to have a conversation with parents, of course, about their child's progress, their deficits. There's a little compact or contract that we have signed, so we talk about how parents can support the work at home, what we're doing at school, and everybody signs this. So through those conversations, I imagine some of those are happening during the day, if they're not happening at some of these reading events at night. I defer to Beth and Chris if there's anything else you'd add beyond that.
And down in whole school, all kinds of little initiatives after school hours other than our title months. Most of those conversations will be happening on a one-on-one basis. Parents are meeting with teachers and asking how they help them learn.
Conferences.
Yeah, conferences.
I have to say, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that summer reading isn't proven to help.
And some of that is, attendance. And it's
Well, okay.
not necessarily getting the kids there who you want to get there as
Okay.
well. Yeah.
Because, we are in the UNESCO City of Literatures. We've had them come and speak before us on a multitude of different issues and have a great library system with our different communities. And we're very volunteer and everything like that. I guess I'm one of the things I wanted to kind of promote was, how do we get, all of these assets we have in our community to help us with summer programming and things like that, and if it's not proven to be successful, that way. Now, if it is just a matter of attendance and things like that, and other things are the root of it, but we're always trying to fight that summer drop-off, and it almost sounds like it's unavoidable. There's nothing we can do unless we keep them in school year-round.
There we go.
Is that
I-
so? That's where we
That's where we're
That's where we're
headed.
headed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Are we still doing the summer programming this year?
In the 21st century schools, we are.
Only those?
Yes.
So, do I understand correctly that last year you had it in, did you say all the buildings?
Yes.
So now it's, and in the 21st century, is it the 5-6 week model?
Yes.
Just half day?
Yes. Half day for the tutoring, and then the kids are there all day.
Oh, I see.
And if kids are in special education, and there's data to show regression or a variety of other factors like a critical learning period, they qualify for extended school year. And that's served in a variety of different locations, but we have some centers for kids at Whitcomb and City. And they have 5 weeks of instruction just to maintain their skills.
Sure.
So that when they come back, it doesn't take so long.
right. Well, and I know the reading clinic at the University of Iowa had a summer contingent. It wasn't full summer, but it did extend. So, yeah.
Any other questions from folks? No? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, it really helps to know kind of that basic building block. Oh, I did have a question. So I'm guessing that you picked your best and your brightest to come tonight at Alexander. So
That's a slam.
no, I'm just
All best
saying,
and bright.
which is great. But I guess I want to know, like throughout the buildings. I mean, are we, the PLCs? I mean, this is rigorous. This is a lot of work. So I guess where are we at with making sure this is happening with this much fidelity across the district?
exactly the
Great
kind of thing that we do every month at our IDS principal meetings, set and communicate direction around everything that you heard here. But I'll defer to them to see if they feel like they're the recipients of that message.
Yeah, I think it's the expectation, it's systematic, and there are fidelity checklists that we need to complete, and so it's just the expectation.
We also have the central theme of the MTSS system of supports for any professional development that happens at the elementaries throughout the school year on those Thursday afternoons too. So that central theme is connected to all the buildings and then supported with the IDS and principals as well as the PLC structure.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So you have your ladies.
Thank you.
All right, so gonna have an ethnic studies update. Who am I looking to?
Actually, Brady, we asked if he would come and talk a little bit about some curriculum for the ethnic studies.
All right. Thank you for inviting me, and well, I was going to be here, but yeah, for asking about this. So we ran through the course registration, of course, as we know, and this is one of the new courses that was put up on the slides. I think we went through in December. We talked to Tom Carey, was at the work session. We sort of went through how we were, approaching this with the understanding of where we are at in terms of the budget. I had a team of between 8 and 10 teachers from all 4 high schools. Monique was on there as a member of the cultural proficiency team and just generally awesome person. Another CPT leader was on there who's a science teacher doing some advanced work at the university in this field. And so we had built a curricular model based on the Understanding by Design work that we had done previously, submitted that. It was accepted by all of you. We put that on the registration form and then did some work promoting it. My understanding is that we had students enroll at a sufficient rate at City High School. I think they had 28.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And Tate had 15. And so if you think through Tate's class size average, it's probably in that 12 to 13. So that's a really great enrollment rate for them. West High School and Liberty they were not that high, 12 and I think 8 respectively. And there's probably a variety of reasons that surround that. I don't know what they are. So City High School will be running it as an elective in the springtime, and I think Tate is going to offer it in the fall, although I'm not 100% certain on where it lands within their curriculum. They run a slightly different model in terms of their curriculum. So I'm pulling the team back together, the band's getting back together to do more work around the curriculum, and it'll be mostly the same people, although there's going to probably be, like Mitch was on it last year, so I'm not sure if he'll serve on it again or not that he wouldn't be qualified, but that's sort of where we're at, in the process, and I'm excited. I think it's going to be I like this model that we've had a couple of summers to build curriculum. We've pulled together a team of people from across the district in different capacities that bring different life experiences and sensitivities to it. We'll have some time because it won't run until the springtime at City High, and maybe we'll have a faster pace, obviously, at Tate. The teachers there are really excited that it's running and that there are enough students enrolled, and they're ready to do the curriculum writing. So we'll have writers, reviewers, and researchers this summer all working on it. So that's sort of where we're at. If you had a chance, just anecdotally, to read Kyle Korver's article "Privileged" that came out after the Russell Westbrook incident with the fan, I think that really sort of speaks to a lot of the work that we have to do. If you haven't read it, it's phenomenal. And I had some really interesting discussions with my students about it, and I think it also just even the challenge of having that discussion about race and privilege and gender and orientation, it is really hard. It's hard to talk about, and it's very hard for students to talk about it with each other. So I think having a space that's carved out intentionally to have those conversations is important. So the class culminates with a community action project, so that either builds action or awareness. And Carrie Watson will be teaching it at City High School. She's done several summers of work on community action projects and community service projects in the classroom. So, and I know Jody Gibson at Tate's excited to do it as well.
Oh, that's the instructor that
At
will do
Tate,
it at Tate.
yeah.
Now, with the Tate, Tate's gonna be in Old Hoover next year.
Yep.
There's some opportunity
Yeah.
for some
Collaboration.
cross-collaboration with a lot of things there with its closer proximity to City High.
Yeah, definitely.
Some great opportunities there.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, so we'll put it again, just like, and put it out, so it's in the program of studies, and we'll see how enrollment goes in the subsequent years, for it, and what our budget looks like. Yeah.
And it's a one trimester course.
It's a one trimester elective for 10th through 12th graders with a prerequisite of either American Studies, AP US History, or AP Human Geography. And we wanted that, the team really wanted some entry-level sort of understanding of either global issues through Human Geography or US History through AP US History or American Studies. They thought that was a good entry ticket in terms of content.
Yeah.
So, first it came out, the proposal of the board, there were a few different ones, and one was integrating this stuff into the social studies
Yeah.
curriculum. Has that gone away, or are we still
No.
trying to integrate?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
We're still doing that work.
Great.
Yep, and try to figure out how to, to weave it in. I think a lot of the social studies teachers and historians, times, I think if you're teaching powerful social studies, it should be in there every day. I mean, that's the story of us, and so we shouldn't shy away from any of those sorts of issues and discussions and conversations. Sometimes our curricular materials aren't exactly where we would like them to be. Diane and I have been looking at some of it at the elementary level, and that's just the reality of the books and stuff that you buy. So I think teams have been doing that, doing that work.
And when did social studies curriculum review happen last?
10, 11. Yeah, and we purchased for the start of the fall of 2012.
So is it coming up again?
Well, I mean, in the scope of the universe, yeah.
Is it every 7 years that happens, or no? Is that-
Previously.
Okay.
And then it was 8, and now it might be 11 or 12. So, I mean, that is just the reality. I mean,
Yeah.
you're going to make decisions. We can figure out how to work together and to collaborate and to pull together resources. We're one-to-one. Teaching Tolerances has an unbelievable repository of resources. And so I always, look at that budget thing, and yes, I would like to have a quicker review cycle for my content area, but if I'm thinking $300, $500, $750,000 of purchases of stuff, I'd way rather have people and time and training. So
Yeah, and stuff is out there,
it's out there, absolutely.
but it's kind of on individual teachers to decide
Yeah.
if that
yeah,
is the priority.
exactly.
Right.
And then figuring out with your PLCs or your teacher teams or your cohorts how to make it more of a priority.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're due, I think ours will be about an 11-year cycle.
Okay.
That's the way it goes.
Any other questions on ethnic studies or where that's headed? I guess how, in general, how are classes promoted? I mean, what's the...
Well, in this, I would say, every school in secondary does it a little bit different, and it's typically, I know more about the senior high than I do about junior high, and junior high is a little bit more locked in. They don't have nearly as many electives. But typically, departments will carve out days in particular where they are talking with students most of the day about courses that are out there, and we make a very concerted effort to talk about all of the courses, not just our own. And I think we're pretty committed to the idea that we want students to have a well-rounded education, to take advantage of the opportunities that we provide to them, in the Iowa City schools. And so counselors obviously, have a role. Word on the kid street's huge too. I mean, they come to us and they've already started making decisions about reputations and rumors and difficulty levels, and they're very strategic. If they're taking 3 AP classes or 2 AP classes, or they're going to take an elective they've never done before and they think it'll be challenging, or they want to get into this area, you know how it works. They're they're smart and savvy. They talk to their peers, and so there's ongoing just conversations with them. It's one of my favorite times of the year, to be honest, because you get to talk to them about interests that they have and how to challenge themselves. And I always share a story with them. I had an amazing student academically said, I've never had really a class here that's challenged me. And I said, well, how did you do in your art classes? Oh, I didn't take art class. I'm not very good at art. Oh.
Okay.
Might challenge
We
you.
might challenge you in other words, yeah, so, there you go. But I mean, that's sort of the conversations, that we have.
I'm surprised at the numbers just because
Yeah.
the impetus came out of West. It felt like to me,
I
like
know.
like
Well, some of it.
roaring.
As I say,
Yeah,
to
some
Phil's
graduated.
point, kids cycle.
They did, yeah.
And sometimes, I think back to the opening up the regional center, the first year, we had a lot less interest than we thought we did, because sometimes it's hard to sell kids an idea. It's easier to sell them something they can see.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
to Brady's earlier term there, you have a successful year with it, and that breeds its own level of interest among peers
Yeah.
and younger siblings and things like that. So I think getting the flywheel turning is sometimes really difficult to do because kids are reluctant to do something new. Take the art class, it's outside my comfort zone, I kind of have these things I know I'm going to do. Sometimes we struggle a little bit to get them to try something that's...
And how much is the cross? So City High, I can see, say goes well and the word of mouth there. How
Yeah.
much of that is going to bleed into Weston Liberty? I mean, that
Yeah.
to me,
I know.
we
I
could get it
don't
up and
know.
running at City. And
Yeah.
is there a way to?
I would say, just because Liberty's newer, that the Tate City and West High students were working more closely on this when it had some momentum the last couple of years. I think and many of the juniors and seniors who had the option to go to Liberty stayed at West,
Right.
and so that sort of core. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure how to.
The kids
get
are
a crossover.
now having one. They're so much in contact with each other at all
Right.
the schools now
Yeah.
with
Social media.
social media and everything. Like it's instantaneous, right? It doesn't matter that you're miles apart anymore.
Right.
And so I think word of mouth will travel from school to school if you have a good start and a good program. I think, and consequently, if you have a bad one, word of mouth will also carry.
Sure.
Right? So
Oh, yeah,
I think that's very
yeah.
important to make sure it's good.
Mhm.
And then I think they'll all find out about it.
Great.
Maybe the community action project can.
Yeah.
Well, I think so.
Can
I
include
think
That's
so.
a piece of it,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
you know,
Exactly. Yeah.
part of it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Promotion.
And it's discussion oriented. Students, if you can create a space that's safe and comfortable for them, they feel more confident. They want to have discussions. You have to be. That was something that we worked on a lot. And Monique could attest to this. To really, how do you create a space that is, okay with being uncomfortable, that does not expect closure. So we have some protocols we've developed, and we'll try to use.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll let you know how it goes.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be a great update for next year for sure.
Yeah,
Definitely
absolutely.
get an
Yeah.
overview. So the next, talking about May, the Ed Committee meeting, setting the agenda. One thing I want to add to that is what we talked about, Steve. So next year, my thought for the Ed Committee is to try to make this really a showcase for what's going on in our schools. And I asked Steve to kind of put this out to the schools to say, what do you guys want to show the board? What are the programs going on? So Castle was a great example this year. But what else is out there in the schools that you want to show off? Because we don't get to see that stuff. We're all up here at 30,000 feet. So that's kind of what I'm thinking for Ed Committee next year, is that we just have now if things come up, obviously we'll add them. But to begin with, just so we're not scratching our heads of what should we, because we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what's going on in the schools. So I asked Steve to kind of put that out to his folks and let principals talk to their staff so that hopefully we have a line out the door and we decide what the priorities are to have people come in. And then maybe it would make more sense when we go to that school because it's something happening at that school.
And
And
we
that
talked
would,
about not just picking a school because the library is open or we have adequate parking or any of the other things that go along with that, but if we actually have schools that want to show their programs off to us, we also talked about we may have to be flexible in time depending on what the program is and so that we can see it in action. So we'll get that I guess bullpen full of ideas out there, and then that'll allow us hopefully to do a better job scheduling things and seeing more of our work in action like we did with the team tonight on the literacy piece.
and then, thinking that December is probably not a good month for Ed Committee because we've got winter break. So pretty hard to cram that in along with board meetings. And March is another tough one. With spring break in there, I think it's just logistically it becomes hard to. And so, this year it felt really kind of scrambling to find a date. Missing my daughter's choir concert tonight, which isn't very happy. make me feel good. So just having that planning ahead of time, and then really giving our buildings an opportunity to really shine and show us the cool stuff, because we know there's lots of great stuff going on. I just don't know what it is and where it's happening. So maybe that's something we can talk about in more detail in May.
Yeah, if you wanted your ethnic studies update, you should go out to City High
That's
in
right.
spring.
Exactly.
Students' room.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's exactly what I'm thinking.
When they have their
Castle at
project,
Southeast.
so you got
Their
some-
projects, we want to see them.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Carrie Watson loved that I just volunteered her to do that.
Well, Steve told me there'd be a line out the door, so.
So, yeah, no, but I think that'd be, it makes a lot
Okay,
of sense.
great. Is that the board can
Yeah.
feel?
Yeah.
A useful,
Sounds good.
good use of our time.
Yeah, the only thing is, it's on our retreat agenda, but the discussion of moving the committee to the ESC. So that would just have to be obviously moved around a bit to try and have fewer meetings and
Condense
make it
things.
easier on the board members. I assume that's why that's been proposed.
Yeah.
We can talk about the retreat.
Yeah. So just, I won't be there this weekend, so put that, just remember, it might be worth it to get out there to see something in
Well,
action.
I will say that Phil and I were back at the table when we first started the Ed Committee. In fact, actually, there wasn't an Ed Committee when we started on the board, and we were part of the development of going out to the schools, and the staff have loved it.
Yeah.
At least that's been my impression when we've gone into the buildings. I think we felt like we're hosting the board, and we get to kind of show off, and the principal comes and tells us, usually shows us things that they're doing. So I've seen it be really positive to go into the buildings and have them there.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
and that's the one thing, I guess, it's almost like a DPO meeting where you go and the first thing is the principal comes and it gives you the rundown on what's unique about our school and the things that we do. And the district used to have the district showcase at the board meetings at the beginning where they would, have a 5 or so minute section about, okay, this is something new and unique we're doing district-wide or in a certain school, that type of a thing. So, there is benefit to go out, but it does make a challenge and, going to different places at different times and things that way. So.
Yeah, and I'm somebody who will be challenged by that for sure, just with my job, but I think the value of just getting a first-hand look at some of the great stuff that's happening
Yes.
in action is going to just inform the work and be fun. I mean, why do we do this? Not to dig through budgets and draw maps, but to, well, some of us, Chase, I don't know, but to see the good stuff that's happening. Yeah.
The fun parts.
The fun parts. The learning.
Yes.
All right.
So I'd like to add to the agenda, if we could, the preschool update.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's what, Diane, are you comfortable with that?
Yep, we can do that.
Great. Anything else for May?
This is 4:30 start. I'm sorry, I didn't pay attention to it.
4:30 at Liberty High.
4:30 at Liberty, yeah.
Okay.
Easy for
Nice.
you.
Yeah, the action.
And I'm just gonna throw this out there, is Liberty the right place for us to have, is there a reason we're doing that at Liberty? I'm just thinking, if we're doing preschool, would there be a better?
We're doing fine arts.
Oh,
Fine
fine arts
arts.
update. Yeah.
Is that why we're doing it at Liberty? Okay.
There's a great fine artist at Liberty, so.
Volunteer number 2.
Can-
I am, that's right.
All right. Anything else for May? So can we adjourn the Ed Committee meeting?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
P. We'll transition to work session, 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 to work session.